And the reason that I'm here with Ezra Ford today talking about Whitney Houston is that I saw the movie, I Want to Dance with Somebody, with British actress Naomi Ackie, 30-year-old British actress playing Whitney. You said that your boss told you you must see this film because she was electrifying as Whitney. I did not. She did a good job. I did not think at any point, that's Whitney on the screen. There was a separation, and it could just be because Whitney was, I am the MTV generation when MTV was actually music television. I'm the one who sat in front of the TV at 2 or 3 years old, videotaping my favorite videos onto a VHS tape and watching them over and over and over and over again. And one of those that I played incessantly was I Want to Dance with Somebody, because I absolutely, probably my very first crush was Whitney Houston. And because she had it all. She had the voice. She was drop dead gorgeous. She was sweet. She was talented. I mean, she had everything. And that, I'm sure you will agree with me, is what makes it so tragic about the last half of her life or so, which was, all too brief as it was, because she fell victim to drugs, which so many people do, who have to be these personas that are bigger than their human bodies actually are. And you have to rely on things like drugs to stay afloat and eventually pay the ultimate sacrifice. Did I sum that up right, or is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just that she was a once in a generation talent.
Yeah.
That voice and the production of those songs, and I mean just how incredibly talented she was. And there are very few artists that you just hear a few notes of them and know exactly who that is. And for her to have had the voice and to have had the string of hits that she had, and then as you mentioned, just the all too familiar script for the same thing with Elvis. Your persona becomes so huge, and I think the disadvantage, the Beatles often mentioned that they, as much as they loved and admired Elvis, they pitied Elvis because the Beatles had each other. There were 4 Beatles, yes, right? Elvis was alone.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways, when you are a solo artist like that and you become a phenom, like an Elvis Presley, like a Whitney Houston, you don't have anyone, number one, to keep you in check. So you are maybe more likely to do what you want in developing some of those less than healthy habits. And, you don't have anyone to also kind of celebrate or to talk to about the mania and the madness that is celebrity and rising to heights that those 2 artists did. Lennon and McCartney could maybe check each other or could kind of just support each other, Harrison and Starr, and just the 4 Beatles together being able to be like, to kind of support each other and to be there for each other during that madness was an advantage that someone like Elvis and someone like Whitney didn't have. And, you wonder how much that played into their own undoing.
Mm-hmm. And, what I liked about this movie is that it was mostly about the music. You can get into the scandalous part of Whitney's life with the drugs, and, she had her girlfriend Robin Crawford, who people want to say, was she gay? Was she not gay? Was she bisexual? And then you have the period of Bobby Brown. I didn't want to particularly see, graphic scenes between her and Robin Crawford, or between her and Bobby Brown, for that matter. And and the film doesn't really focus on that. It touches on it because it has to, but it doesn't focus on it. It focuses on the iconic performances that she did in her life, many of which I remember seeing live, like the Welcome Home Heroes concert that she did when all the military came home from Desert Storm, and she gave that concert in Norfolk. When she did the national anthem in 1991 for the Super Bowl, while everybody was over at Desert Storm. That, to me, because I saw that on TV that night, and I was 6 years old, and I will never forget it. We've never heard it sung like that. We'll never hear it sung like that again. Is that a performance that you remember, or do you have a Whitney performance that you know?
Oh, absolutely. That Super Bowl performance of the national anthem, when you think about where the country was at the time, the only other, rendering of the Star Spangled Banner, I mean, other than Hendrix, obviously, but that's, apples and oranges. But
right.
I think about Marvin Gaye at the NBA All-Star Game.
Right.
And how he did it almost kind of like with that bossa nova kind of beat that Marvin brought in the early 80s with just, some of those classics. So I think of him, but I mean, to even be whispered in the same breath as Marvin Gaye just reiterates how high Whitney climbed as far as just an icon, and to be able to unite the country with your voice like that. Because the more that we sit here and talk about it, the more I think about how first of all time you hear Whitney Houston, that voice doesn't even sound like it comes from this planet.
Right. And it's funny that you said Marvin Gaye, because she said when she was asked to do it, she went to her musical director, who is Ricky Minor, who people will know from, he directed the band on American Idol. He was also Jay Leno's band director for a time. She went to Ricky and said, I want to do this my way. Have you heard Marvin Gaye when he sang at the NBA? And that is also like a year before he was tragically shot fatally by his own father, so that has more emotion to it when you hear that than it otherwise would have. He said, did you hear Marvin Gaye? Marvin came out with his own beat. Marvin took his time. Marvin sang it the way he would sing any song. That's the way I want to do it. So instead of, oh, say, can you see, Whitney was doing, oh, say, can you see? She was doing it in her own way, and Marvin was the inspiration for that. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. Another performance that I've seen, it was before my time, but I've watched it many times on YouTube, is Home, which is the main title from The Wiz, which was her debut performance. She was on the Merv Griffin show, and she was 19 years old, and she walks out and sings the song. And her mother, how much do you know about her mother, Sissy Houston?
I just know that she was a great, great gospel and soul singer.
Yes.
I don't know a whole lot about her backstory other than that. The apple didn't fall too far from the tree from her incredibly talented daughter.
Sissy
to her daughter from her.
Sissy was the Atlantic Records backup singer. So any Atlantic Records, any record you have, anywhere from Elvis to Wilson Pickett to Aretha to Dusty Springfield, my favorite album, Dusty in Memphis. Any of those Atlantic Records, Bette Midler, David Bowie.
Oh, Young Americans.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Young Americans.
Oh, right.
That's it.
Oh,
yes. Yeah. Sissy came up with that. and that's her singing it. And,
yeah, because Luther Vandross was on that session too. Because that's when Bowie was like, I want to completely leave glam behind and make this kind of blue-eyed soul kind of record.
Yep. And so that was Sissy that came up with that. And so she was any Atlantic record that you buy, which is one of the great labels in history. Sissy was leading the backup. The Aretha song, Ain't No Way, this insanely high pitch in the back as she's doing the chorus. That's Sissy. So she was incredible herself.
I remember now that I'd read that she was on a couple Elvis records. I'm going to have to dig back and see which Elvis records she was on.
Right. The Sweet Inspirations, the group The Sweet Inspirations, she was the lead of that, and they backed up everybody on Atlantic Records. So and also Elvis. So yes, indeed. But anyway, Whitney was doing Home from The Wiz on her debut, and Sissy's sitting backstage, and she says the band is too slow, so they need to speed it up. So she sneaks backstage and directs the band to move them to pick up the pace, to pick it up, to keep up with Whitney. And if you look at the tape, you can see her in the background conducting the band to keep them on pace. And Merv Griffin says at the end of that performance, and this was before her debut record or anything, he says, Whitney Houston, we won't forget that name. And he had no idea. He had no idea what those 6 or 7 words were going to mean, and for the rest of time. And like I said, what I like about that is it doesn't shy away from the drugs. It doesn't shy away from things people might want to know about her personal life. But I really could care less. I want to know about the music, and it is mostly about the music. And they do use her voice because you can't duplicate Whitney's voice, so they do use her actual voice on the recordings, and except for her very first Greatest Love of All performance when she was very young, which they use Naomi Aki's voice. So I was glad that they used Whitney's voice.
I know that a lot of folks felt like Bohemian Rhapsody, glossed over some of the darker sides and the darker parts of Freddie's life. But these films are supposed to be a celebration of the artist and of the spirit, and just that obviously a lot of famous folks struggle with a lot of these demons, just like anyone in any walk of life struggles with that type of thing. I think obviously when you're famous and you have that level of success, you can indulge yourself a little bit more. But Sacha Baron Cohen had originally been picked to play Freddie. And the story that he wanted to tell, he wanted to be very warts and all and very hard R as far as some of the subject matter. And, Roger Taylor and Brian May were just like, look, Freddie never hid any part of that among his friends and his peer group. And, obviously, if you want to know about that side of Freddie, goodness knows there's plenty of books and there's plenty of places that you can read all about, the debauchery that was his life. But they wanted to remember their friend, and they wanted to portray him in a loving and caring manner. And I think that's what they did. So, to each their own as far as what they want. But, if you want to learn that, or if you want to find out about those darker sides of folks, it's not like these incredibly famous individuals don't have about half a dozen books. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure someone's written warts and all account of Whitney's life. So I don't think that necessarily has to be at the forefront of any motion picture. I mean, obviously I'm sure it sells tickets, but you also kind of want to have some respect for the subject matter and for, the folks that are still with us that were close to those folks.
plenty of documentaries, hard-hitting documentaries out there about Whitney and her last days and her sexual preferences and all that. Plenty of that. Even a theatrically released documentary from like 2018, I think. Clive Davis was a producer on this film, who was the one who discovered her and put her on the map and found those great songs for her to sing. He wanted the music to be captured, and I think he did that successfully. The acting was good, not great. Stanley Tucci played Clive Davis. I think he was probably the best individual performance in the whole thing. Some things that sort of surprised me was, and might surprise most people, was that it was not Bobby Brown that was the villain in the film, although he certainly was no saint and no help in her life. He was not the ultimate villain. It was, in fact, her father, John, who squandered tens of millions of dollars of his daughter's earnings and was the main reason that she had to work so hard. And finally, when he got sick and went into the hospital, she put her sister-in-law in charge to managing her. She did it to make it easier on him, and instead of being grateful for that, he said, then you pay me the $100 million that you owe me, and sued her at the end of his life for $100 million. So how could that have made her feel,
Yeah.
And I think, Whitney was, it made it look in the film like Clive Davis was the only real father figure that Whitney had. And if you don't have a father figure in life, you're not going to pick the right guy or girl, whatever the situation, whatever you choose. But I think Whitney just wanted to be loved, and she wanted to be loved as a person, not as Whitney Houston, the star.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she would have taken that in any form or fashion, any way she could get it. That's how it came across to me. But of course, as we talked about, you and I are girl dads for life. We are devoted to our one and only daughters. Whitney had a one and only daughter, Bobby Christina, and we know, unfortunately, the very similar fate that she suffered, death being eerily similar to her mother's, only 22 years old, and Whitney was only 48. Watching scenes of Whitney being hauled off to rehab in front of her daughter, or having her daughter brush her mother's hair and sing to her to comfort her, playing the motherly role for the adult, those scenes are almost unbearable to watch for me as a father, especially knowing what would eventually happen. Those things, those particular things really hit me in the heart, and I can imagine you would feel the same way watching the movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think anyone who's had a family member that struggled with addiction, so in instances like that, I think it's all too common in a lot of homes and in a lot of stories where the parent or the child actually ends up being more of a parent to the
right
parent than the parent is.
And
I mean, and that's heartbreaking.
And not just addiction, but any kind of trauma inflicted on a child, any kind of trauma. And she said at one point, she goes on tour with me and she sees everything. That baby saw things that she should never have had to see. I mean that is very clear, and it was clear that Whitney loved her daughter, but had no clue how to be a mother. Perhaps that was because she never got the doting that she needed herself as a daughter. You know, but I tend to really overanalyze things like that, and those scenes, you know, being, you know, with my daughter being the center of my world, just to imagine any child having to go through that at such a level is particularly knowing how the story ends, as you said. Thank God it doesn't show Whitney dying. It shows her right up to the end. It shows up to the night she died. She was going to go sing at Clive Davis's Grammy party, and she was going to sing Home just as she sang it. You know, she was determined she was going to get that high note back. And we all knew that the note was gone. You know, we were pulling for her when she put that last album out. We wanted it to do well. You know, it went to #1 and it sold a million copies, but, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, towards the last 10, 15 years, Whitney could not do Whitney anymore. You think that's a fair way of putting it?
I think so. You know, I'd said that Father Time is undefeated, and
right.
You know, the voice is the most precious instrument that we have. So if you take care of it, it'll take care of you.
Right.
You know, I think Whitney certainly isn't the only vocalist who's ever you know gotten older and lost a little bit of zip on their fastball.
And
I can tell you that when you abuse that instrument in the way that Whitney abused it, then it's not going to take care of you the way that you need it
to. Because you're a singer, you're a singer, and you have a great voice. I imagine it doesn't sound the way that it did when you were 25. What do you do to keep your voice in check?
I do a ton of cardio. I feel like if I was talking to somebody about it the other day, if you take care of your voice, it'll take care of you. Frank Sinatra used to swim because obviously you want to keep that lung capacity. You want to build that lung capacity. I'm a fanatic for jogging, so I love to run, drink plenty of water, and just be mindful of how you take care of the instrument. Like we don't. When we're practicing for shows, our bass player's always like, we could practice the night before the show, right? And Stephanie Bryson and I, who's the co-lead vocalist in the Breakfast Club, we're just like, there's no way that we're going to practice the night before a gig because you got to keep the pipes fresh. So a ton of water, a lot of tea, a little toddy here and there just to keep everything on the up and up, and just. You definitely, I cringe when I think about how I didn't take care of my voice when I was younger and when I was in rock bands in college. Now, when you're younger, you think you're bulletproof anyway. And now I look back at it and I'm just absolutely horrified at, some of the stuff I do and how I would not necessarily take care of my voice the way that I should, and how I'd be hoarse for like 2 or 3 days after a show because I've just completely blown the pipes out. And now, you got to take care of it. It's an instrument. You got to practice. You got to make sure that, as I've gotten older, I actually took a page out of Axl Rose's book and started doing vocal cool downs. And it made sense as a runner. I was like, man, why would you want to sing after a show? And it's like, well, you'd stretch after a run, wouldn't you?
Right. And you are stretching the vocal cords. And one big question, do you smoke?
I don't smoke, man.
Yeah. Because smoking dries the vocal cords. And Whitney was always smoking from very early on. And, if you have, we were talking about some of our favorites like Phil Collins, who's 72. All he has is his voice, and thank God he has it. If he didn't have it, he couldn't be back out there. But he's got it because he's taking care of it. Paul McCartney, 80 years old, out there singing for 2.5 hours and another hour and a half for the pre-show for the VIP people. 3 hours and 80 years old and still has a voice.
Oh yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be over at a certain age if you take care of it. However, if you are known for your voice, you know, Whitney Houston, Steve Perry, those kind of people, and you don't take care of it, as we saw that Steve hasn't done in many years, you know, the voice, it will leave you if you don't keep it in check. And, you know, for those people where the voice was the center of it all, that's all they've got. And it was really tragic, you know, from like, you know, after The Preacher's Wife for Whitney, it just, something just went away. In my view, that's about when it was. And she just went out there and she just didn't have it anymore.
And you're right. I mean, you can be absolutely blessed with a voice like Whitney's, but if you don't take care of it, and more importantly, if you abuse it the way that she abused it, just with her lifestyle and, you know, smoking or no, just if you don't take care of it, it's not going to take care of you, and it's not going to hold up.
Right.
So, and it's so sad to think, like I said, that, you know, otherworldly voice, to you know, lose that high note, and then, you know, at the very end of it all, still trying to chase it and just, you know, not doing what she needed to do to take care of it. So.
Yep, I agree 100%. Well, Ezra, it always means so much to me to talk to you at any level, because you are a treasured friend. You're also a hero of mine. I am one of those people that wishes I could sing but can't carry a tune in a bucket. So I live vicariously through people like you. I enjoy your shows. I enjoy your talent. I thank you for what you bring to your audiences, because I can tell you with your gift, you definitely make the world a better place. So it's always great to talk to you at any level, but in this particular instance, you've saved the podcast. So God bless you for that.
Oh, I love you, buddy. I'm so happy to do it. As always, it's always a pleasure to catch up, and my Happy New Year to you, and my best to your girls.
Yep, I love you too, man, and give Maggie a big hug for me, and you all keep doing what you're doing, and let me know when you are in town or doing a big show. I'll come and do a write-up for you.
I love it. I hope to see you soon.
All right. Well, it's great talking to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you, brother. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.